Hello, it's Mr. Mulvey again with a video about heredity. In this video, you will learn about how traits are passed from parents to offspring, and which traits can and can't be passed from parents to offspring. So you're probably asking yourself, what is heredity? Well, heredity is the passing of traits from parents to offspring. First, I'd like to talk a little bit about what heredity is. So we need a little bit of background information. The first thing I want you to know is that traits are controlled by genes. Not the type of genes like blue jeans that you buy in the mall, but genes, G-E-N-E-S, that have to do with genetic information. So traits, by definition, are just physical characteristics, and genes are factors that control traits. Sometimes they're considered specific locations on chromosomes. Genes are carried on chromosomes. If you remember, in another video we talked about the chromosome theory of inheritance that states that genes are passed from parent to offspring on chromosomes. Chromosomes are composed of DNA, and those chromosomes are passed to offspring from their parents on reproductive cells. You might remember me saying this before, but DNA stands for deoxyribonucleic acid. So what do all of these genetic information carriers have in common? Genes, chromosomes, and DNA. Well, they're all made of the same stuff. They're all composed of DNA. Genes are just smaller parts of chromosomes, which chromosomes are made of DNA. Now, offspring have alleles, genes, and chromosomes in pairs. In another video, I talked about alleles being just different forms of the same gene. But everything that you see in that list always appears in pairs. Where do you think you get those pairs? Well, one of each of those pairs comes from your mother, and the other from your father. So what traits can be inherited? I want you to take a look at the following list and tell me which ones you think would possibly be inherited or passed down. A scar from an injury, speaking a language like Spanish or English, Chinese, a missing limb from an injury, or something like fur color. Well, fur color is the only one in that entire list that can be passed down. Why is that? Only traits controlled by genes can be passed to offspring. The only trait that was in that list that is controlled by a gene was fur color. Well, what other types of traits are controlled by genes other than fur color? Well, there's eye color. You see there's blue, green, brown. Different types of skin color. Height. Now we're talking about height. In humans it's controlled by several factors. I'll get into that later. Sometimes genes, sometimes other factors. In plants, like pea plants, it's controlled by just one gene. Camouflage. Curly versus straight hair. Beak shape. Leaf shape. Flower color, and there are many, many others. The other question would be which types of traits are not controlled by genes. Well, things like injuries. You see this tree here is in a fire. If it survives, it may have some burned parts. Would it pass those down to its offspring? No, it wouldn't. Other types of injuries. Learned information like migration patterns, sign language, or learning some kind of a language. Synthetic traits like dyed hair, earrings, or tattoos. And then weight. Sometimes, somewhat. There are some genetic aspects to weight, but mainly it's environmental, like diet and exercise. So all of these types of traits that are not controlled by genes are controlled by environmental factors, things that are not in that genetic information. So let's review. Number one, offspring inherit traits only from their parents. So no matter what you've heard about, hey, you got your eyes from your grandmother, or hey, you got your hair from your uncle, your only direct source for genetic information is your parents, your mother and your father. The other really important point is that only traits controlled by genes can be passed on to offspring. So, we now know what DNA stands for and what it does. We know that it does not stand for did not attempt, because you sat here and watched this entire video. That's a joke, you can laugh. So as always, I'd like to say thanks for watching, and stay tuned for more of my awesome science videos.